Hello and welcome to another episode of Rebellious Creed Podcast, where we talk about motivation, experiences, and we explore the world around us. We are the Thomas Brothers, and I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan, and today we will be talking about combating loneliness. This is an interesting topic. A lot of times we talk about, our whole podcast is about building your personal creed, right? And some of that is learning how to potentially, I think it's a couple faceted, right? Learning how to be by yourself and enjoying your own company, as well as there's many people that don't have, especially men, that don't have companionship and friends like maybe per se some women do. So we're going to kind of going through, breaking it down a little bit about how to combat loneliness in your life.
Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
The most valuable commodity I know of is information.
And that, my friends, is called integrity. That's called courage. Now that's the stuff leaders should be made of.
Either you're somebody or you're nobody.
You're not the devil. You're practice.
All right, so I think that from the top, let's maybe define what loneliness is. A definition that I found that I thought was very descriptive is that loneliness is a subjective, unwelcome feeling of lack or loss of companionship. It happens when there is a mismatch between the quantity and quality of social relationships that we have and those that we want. What do you think about that one, Ethan?
I think that's a great definition. And I think kind of at the end there, it says like that we want, right? I think a lot of times we have interactions that we don't particularly want. And it's like, for example, how do I say this delicately?
Fighting with your spouse does not mean you're...
No. Like, for example, sometimes, and it hasn't happened so much lately, but sometimes I'll get home from work, right? I've been at work all day, and I'll get home and my wife, and this is very rarely, but it'll just be a rough
almost
day,
never. Like one time 20 years ago.
A rough day with the kids, right?
Yeah.
And, it'll just be, she has a short fuse and I have a short fuse or whatever, but finally we get the kids down and we've had conversations and she's like, at work all day you have like adult like interactions and you get to like have fun and talk with people and build relationships all day. And, I'm just here with the kids, which
talk to people and have fun. What do you think this is?
Yeah, I understand completely. Right. But I'm like at work, I'm not building relationships with anyone. I'm just getting my job done. I would say 90% of the time at work, I have headphones in because I don't want anybody to talk to me.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and a lot of times too, yeah, I have tons of meetings every day where I'm talking with people, but it's not like, I'm not like gaining anything out of those interactions. It's not like wanted interactions. It's just like, business, I have to do this or whatever else, which is just, kind of interesting. But, I can understand just from an adult versus a kid level. But I like that sometimes people can seem really, really busy and be going. But if it's not the kind of interactions they want or need, then they can still feel lonely.
I think I don't think there's any working man out there who's got a stay-at-home wife who manages the kids at home. Really, both facets of that can lead to loneliness. Your wife's at home with the kids all day. It can be lonely just having to talk to, like 5, 6, 7-year-olds all day, and repeat yourself a million times. And so, like,
I say that only from my side.
Yeah.
That looking on her side, we can understand each other.
Oh,
really, because it would be lonely just to all your communication is with a 5-year-old all day.
Oh yeah, so it's like almost like both of you come in and you're like, I feel lonely today, or like I didn't connect with anybody. But even at work, you have to watch what you say because you don't know who you'll offend, or you have to especially when you're, in the sensitive world that we live in today. I mean, heck, you got to watch everything that you say. So, in fact, I just got into it with a guy the other day at work. He was like, I was reporting on some of the customers, like, feedback to our company, and some of the customers are conservative and they don't like some of the liberal stances our company's taking. And this guy who didn't know me at all, he was like making jokes and like, oh, this is so unfounded, or this is such BS. And I was like, I was just trying to play the middle. I was just like, hey man, these are our customers' complaints, we got to take them seriously. And he's just like, nah, this is just right wing like craziness. And I'm like, dude, people actually believe this stuff. He's like, do you actually believe this stuff? And I was like, it's important for me to consider this stuff. So I was just like trying to play this line, that like, it's just can be so difficult. It's like, this is not a conversation I want to have,
But you're supposed to bring your whole self to work.
Oh yeah. Well, that's only my sexuality.
Oh, okay. All right.
Only if I have some kind of sexual, thing that I feel like I need to tell everybody at work. That's the only personal stuff I need to bring to work.
Yeah.
Aside from that, but you're right. Like, even talking to people, that's not like emotional connection. And sometimes you can feel isolated in a crowded room. Actually, I think it's lyrics to a Taylor Swift song. Do you ever feel lonely in a crowded room? I think this is the lyric, but I'm sure my wife will appreciate that reference if she listens to this episode. But so there's different types of loneliness apparently, and I didn't know this. So there are a couple different ones. I'll run through them here. So there's emotional loneliness, which is the absence of meaningful relationships. There's social loneliness, which is described as a perceived deficit in the quality of social connections. And then there's an existential loneliness, a feeling of fundamental separatedness from others and the wider world. So I think they're all very close, but they're kind of all a little bit different. And then within those, there's kind of other types of loneliness can include transient loneliness, a feeling of that comes and goes of being lonely. I think this is probably everybody's experienced this. Situational loneliness, where it only occurs at certain times, like say on Christmas or holidays, or Valentine's Day is a big situational loneliness day for people that don't have spouses or a loved one to spend Valentine's Day with. And then there's chronic loneliness, which is feeling lonely all the time. So, I think that, but before we dive a little bit further, I want to ask you a question. Can you tell me a time of when you've felt lonely, Ethan?
Oh, geez. So this one's probably kind of menial, but every year my family and I travel out west to the western part of the United States for about a month or just over a month. And typically I will stay for like 3 weeks, and then I will come home, and my wife will stay for another week and a half or 2 weeks. And so it's kind of interesting because so much exposure, like when you're married and you got kids, you're always around someone. And then when you sitting in this house all alone and it's quiet and you're just like, okay, well, I guess it's time for dinner,
Mm-hmm.
or it's just like your routine is so thrown off. And you can combat it with, calling the kids and FaceTime and things like that. But I've always kind of, especially when you get into like after a week, if it's like 2 weeks, I think last year it was with how the timing kind of it was over our anniversary that we were apart, our 10-year anniversary. And so it kind of wears on me a little bit, where I start missing the kids and missing my wife and just missing like just social interactions, right? Just like sitting there and talking, or it is kind of nice just to the quiet for a little while, for a couple of days. You're just vegging on TV while you're eating dinner, and you don't hear "daddy, daddy, daddy" a million times, but then you kind of start to miss it a little bit. So that's something that is kind of on an annual basis that I've kind of looked at and tried to work on, and that I felt the absence makes the heart grow fonder, for sure.
Yeah, that's. I mean, no wonder you were able to watch 7 seasons of Peaky Blinders in 2 weeks.
Yep.
I mean, that's understandable, people, and I think that's, and I kind of say that joking, but I also say it like a lot of people do medicate themselves. They do medicate loneliness with distraction. And I mean, when you're talking about 2 weeks, it doesn't make a big of a deal because you're going to see your wife anyway soon.
Well,
but
and it's immediately remedied by them coming back, which is good.
But I think some people do that for years or for longer than that. They get so sucked into video games or so sucked into like different things, television shows or whatever, that they just kind of isolate those around them, and they're alone and they don't get opportunities, or they don't make opportunities to go meet new people. So it just perpetuates that loneliness. And I think for some people that just like drives them even deeper into their virtual world of whatever, World of Warcraft or whatever that may be.
Red Alert 2.
Hey, that game was, you guys play with somebody.
Yeah.
I can give. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear one from you.
So, I think probably one of the loneliest times I felt was when I went to Mexico on my mission. They try to teach you Spanish before you go, but once you get there, you're like, what the heck is going on, And I didn't know much Spanish before then, so I took a 9-week class. They tried to teach me Spanish while at the same time trying to teach me how to teach people these lessons that I couldn't even really say what was going on. And so I got there, and they just put you with somebody. So I got put with this local dude, Mexican guy from Chihuahua, and he was determined not to speak any English to me because he wanted me to learn quick. And so I really struggled trying to communicate anything. I think this guy was kind of lazy, and so when I got there, he was like, I got to straighten up. And so he was like super hardline. Like we got there, and I'm like, dude, I just arrived from America. I need to go buy like a pillow. I need to buy some sheets. And he's like, what? Oh, man. I was like, I need to buy groceries. And he was like pissed that I had to go buy stuff. When I just got there, like I had one bag, and I flew into this new country. I had absolutely nothing. And he's just like, he was mad. And so like, I was like, okay. And I was in this area. There was no other white people in the whole area. Nobody spoke English. I didn't speak Spanish. And one time we were just talking to someone, and like, I think I said something to offend him. I think, or I did something, and not on purpose. But I think actually what it was is that we were knocking on some guy's door, and the guy was coming to the door, and he didn't. And then my companion that I was with didn't see the guy coming, and so he knocked harder. And the guy came to the door. I was like, "Oh, perdón." I said, "Mi compañero es estúpido," because I was just like, "Oh," what I meant to say is like, "Oh, my companion's an idiot. He just didn't see it coming." But it came out wrong. It obviously didn't translate well into Spanish. Like, my companion's stupid, and so because I said that, this dude literally, he gave me the cold shoulder for probably 3 weeks. And so every single like we went to go talk to people, and like, hey, can we talk about Christ? And they're like, yeah, come on in. And he would just look at me, and he would like say, hey, you went to the missionary training center. You give the lesson. And so I'm like fumbling through this stuff, and like have no idea what I'm like. I mean, the people were like, what? And I'm just kind of fumbling through this. I don't know the language. I mean, I don't even really know the lessons that well either. And he wouldn't say anything. It was like his way of punishing me. He was basically saying, okay, if I'm stupid, then you do it, was his response. And it went on that way for like 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks. And I had absolutely nobody to talk to. Nobody knew what I was going through. It was just like, and I was trying to have a brave face because I was like, oh, I'm excited about this thing. I'm here. I'm trying to do this job now. But it really sucked. And I think that was probably one of the loneliest times. I felt lonely at other times of my mission, but I could actually communicate it, at least at those points. Not that anybody cared what I had to communicate. Because when you're 19, you're like, oh, dude, I'm really sick or whatever. Your companion's like, okay, I'm sorry you're sick. Like, deal with it on your own. Like, what is he going to do, So there was times like that, but that time specifically where, like, my companion hated me. I couldn't communicate to anybody around me. I was in a foreign country. I just moved there. The food was different. Everything was different. I was just like, man, this sucks. So
That does suck. And I can relate to a certain extent. Yeah, not knowing the language, and your first companion doesn't speak any English, and you're just like, dude, what did I do? But
yeah.
well, one of the things that I looked into whenever I was doing this is what are the signs of someone who is lonely, right? How can we potentially recognize? And our whole podcast is, we're creating a brotherhood, and we're helping each other. And so, what are some signs that that we can potentially look for in recognizing that somebody's lonely? So obviously, I mean, loneliness is not just specifically a male thing. Obviously, it can affect any gender or class or anyone out there that wants to have relationships. There are kind of anomaly people that just don't want to have any types of relationships. That's maybe a whole different situation. But here's a couple of common signs that might tell us or tell you that someone is really struggling with loneliness. So one is just social withdrawal in general. If you invite them out, or you just like, hey man, I haven't seen you in like 6 weeks. You used to be going out or doing whatever. What's going on? Another one is just a lack of close relationships. Maybe that bachelor who lives in a city all by himself, and he's working and he's not married, and all he does is just go to the gym and work. Go to the gym and then go to work, and then go back home and eat by himself. Right.
Yeah.
Emotional numbness. Sometimes people just get very cold if they have a very distinct transition, and from being very loving or whatever to very emotionally numb. Just general depression, anxiety kind of goes along with that. Another one, we kind of talked about this with technology, but substance abuse. A lot of people will drink or excessive technology, pornography, different things like that are all used to combat or are signs of loneliness. Increased anger or irritability as well. Excessive time spent online, one we just talked about. A lot of times, always being tired. This can kind of go with depression, but physical changes, changes in appetite, disruption in sleep patterns. I know that our grandpa, he lived by himself for a long time, and I mean his sleep patterns were all jacked up. I mean, he'd wake up at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then he would stay up until like 8 o'clock in the morning, and then go to sleep. And then it was just like his rhythm was completely off because I think he was just all by himself. He's just lonely. This one was interesting too. People that they increase their risk-taking behavior. So if people are just taking more risks that seem kind of out of the norm, can be a sign of combating loneliness, or I don't know, just trying to feel something, feeling the rush of cliff jumping, or I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the last one was just self-isolation, which kind of goes back to just social withdrawal. But those were all kind of ones that stuck out to me to say, number one, do I do any of these things? And then number two, do I have any friends or even colleagues or anything else like, that I notice these types of things with. And if I do, then, kind of the next section, and we can talk about this as well. How does one combat that? Which is interesting.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little bit of my preview.
Yeah. A couple things that had similar stuff. I was looking at some different studies and things. One, I think that it's if you're lonely, you're not alone in your loneliness. 1 in 5 people are lonely. There's some studies have shown. 1 in 3 men believe that there is no one to help them if they were ever in need. So that's pretty bad. They wouldn't have anybody to call as like a backup. I think that I felt that way at times, at different times in my life, depending on where I lived. I think living close to family, like you, Ethan, and like my parents, and others, I think that is. I feel more secure, more like I could call someone, and then getting to know some friends. But I think that has ebbed and flowed at different points in my life. Where at some points I felt like I didn't have anybody except for the neighbor that I barely knew across the street, or something like that. A study of 2,000 plus people ages 18 to 89 showed that a couple major factors that led to people being lonely were 1, living alone, 2, having poor health, 3, infrequent social interactions, and 4, being unmarried. Pretty obvious, right? All those things. Be by yourself and don't talk to people, and then you'll be lonely. Yeah, like no crap,
Yeah, that'll for sure make you lonely, increase your loneliness.
Yeah. There's a kind of an organization that's called the Campaign to End Loneliness. And they said that there's critical differences between men and women's friendships and how they're valued in those relationships. So you mentioned a little bit about the differences between men and women earlier, and I thought this was important. So here's how men value friendships with other men. And this is according to this organization. They said men value instrumental aspects of their friendships, like common interests and shared activities are fundamental. One study found that all men valued groups that promoted social and emotional ties with other men, such as gaming, sports, recreational activities, and that increased your overall well-being. And then the last one here is this is how women actually value their relationships. So women value emotional-based aspects of their friendships. So mutual understandings and intimacy are the most important. Disclosing struggles and showing compassion are essential for fostering closeness with female friends. So it's a lot more about that intimacy, being vulnerable. Sometimes, guys, it's a lot harder to get over that, and because of that, you have less meaningful discussions, less intimacy, you could say. So that's those are those two. I thought those were pretty interesting.
Yeah, the difference between men and women and how they, I think how they interact is just very different anyway. And I was going to bring this up a little bit later too, but I think women are just kind of a lot more, I don't know, maybe open, or they're more social creatures. My wife has kind of a group of friends that she hangs out with almost every day with the kids, especially during the summer, and they all go to the park and they hang out and they talk for hours and everything else. I don't know if it's just I don't have that kind of time to make that kind of relationship or interaction with other men, or it's just different. But I don't particularly need that. I think whenever we lived out so we live in North Carolina now, but whenever we lived out in California, I would only call home, I don't know, maybe a couple times a month. I just, that was, and when I'd call home, it'd be like, hey, how you guys doing? Yeah, whatever. And then we'd talk for 10 minutes and be like, okay, all right, well, I'm glad everything's good. Talk to you in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously now that we all live a lot closer, that we see each other more and we talk more, and obviously us doing the podcast, luckily we get to talk a lot more.
Yeah.
But other people, a lot of times, they'll call their parents and be on the phone for a couple hours or whatever, and I'm just like, man, I can't stand. I don't know. I guess just sitting on the phone talking with somebody, it's like I got to be doing something.
Yeah, I think it's different. People engage, I guess, in different ways.
Yeah, we were always told what no news is good news. But I guess there's a statute, there's a limitation to that.
Yeah, it's not always true. I think sometimes no news from people, you have the assumption that if there was something important, then they would have told you. But sometimes if you don't chit chat with people about the simple stuff, then they're not going to share with you. Like, oh yeah, by the way, like I was chit chatting with someone at work the other day, and I was like, hey, how's it going? How's your family doing, or how are you doing? And this girl was like, well, actually, my son has early onset arthritis, and he can't even close his fist in his right hand. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so, like, I think a lot of people, everybody has problems. Everybody's going through something, and likely, that was a woman that shared that with me, but likely they're not going to share it with you unless, one, they're feeling very open, or unless, two, they see that like you are genuinely care.
Well, and that's such a thing in the United States too, is that's like a greeting of, that's like saying hi, how are you? How you doing? Right. Yeah. And it's just like a natural response to that is good or fine. Even if you're not, that's just like a welcome or a greeting. I was watching this video the other day about somebody who came from England. It was like, it was so weird whenever somebody just passed people in the street and they'd be like, oh, how you doing? And it was like, at first I thought people were just being really nice, but then it was like, then I figured out that that's the same thing as like saying what's up or hi.
Yeah. 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 So it's tough. I think that having meaningful connections is so critical. And if I didn't have my spouse, like I would, to have these meaningful conversations and discuss our deepest questions and desires and dreams in life, it would be incredibly lonely. So it's critical.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of things that I just made a short list of things that you could potentially do to combat loneliness in your life. And a few of those are cultivate meaningful connections. So obviously just, if you're interested in finding a life partner, then go and seriously, date somebody. Don't just be hooking up all the time. Reach out to family and friends. If it's not, getting together, it's a phone call, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, well, he doesn't call me. My mom doesn't call me. Well, so yeah, but how many times have you called your mom? And so the phone works both ways. Mm-hmm. So reach out, even if it kind of hurts or it's like, I don't want to do that. Force yourself to do it. Seek support from a professional if you need it. Maybe do some counseling or therapy. Practice self-compassion. Be kind to yourself and understand that, everybody goes through struggles. And like you said, Jared, everybody's got their things. This one person might be going through a divorce. This other lady, her son is having medical issues. These other people, maybe they're in financial trouble. These other people, maybe their father just passed away. Everybody's got their things.
Yep.
And just recognize that and be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Another one was engage in hobbies and interests. Find something you like to do and go out there and do it. I mean, it doesn't take a lot. It could be running, it could be blacksmithing, it could be
Yeah.
pickleball. I don't know, whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, I think that for sports, like there's hobbies and things like that. I think it's to combat loneliness. I think it's important to do things where there are other people. So like, this doesn't mean like going and doing woodworking in your shop or blacksmithing in your backyard or, painting miniature figures. You can still be lonely and do those things. So like,
I guess if you want to do like take a class on something,
go play a sport, go do, jujitsu or go exercise at the gym and talk to other guys. Or girls, volunteer, something that you like. Like there is like a gun range that I'm a member of and a club, and I can go down there anytime I want and talk to anybody about guns or politics or anything. Everybody's always wanting to talk, And heck, there's a bunch of guys old guys that just go down there and just sit and hang out all day and just talk guns. And so, you've got to find a community of people, and sometimes going and doing activities where you're running into other people is critical to building relationships. And then I think one extra part of that is inviting these people over to your house. Hey, can you come over to my house? Or why don't we go out to lunch sometime soon? And we can just get to know each other a little bit better. I think that sometimes people, if you're just casually like, oh, I'm going to do, I'm at work, or we talk to each other, or I go to jiu-jitsu and I talk to some guy and he's just like, hey man, like, yeah, whatever. Maybe he doesn't realize that I really want to be his friend unless I invite him over to my house, or unless we go out and do something outside of jiu-jitsu. And he's like, oh, maybe Jared sees me as some like more than a friend, more than just like an occasional acquaintance that he sees at jiu-jitsu. So I think that's an important step as well, and that's how you build those deeper relationships.
Yeah, I completely agree. The last two that I had on the list was stay busy. Idle hands can always just cause problems.
How does that combat loneliness, though?
So I was gonna say, it was interesting. I was listening to a podcast, part of a podcast, and it was 50 Cent was on the podcast, and so I mean he grew up in like the hood of the hood. His mom had him when she was like 14, and then she couldn't support him, so he went to live with his grandparents while his mom started dealing drugs to try to pay for her kid, and then she ended up getting shot while she was dealing drugs. And I mean his upbringing is just rough, right? He had an interesting take on depression, and his take was, he said, depression is a luxury. And this is quoting from him. He said, some people can't afford to be depressed. You have to pay the bills. He said, you got to get up and you got to go to work. You got to stay busy. He said, most people at work don't feel like being there, but they've got responsibilities, and you know what? They just feel uncomfortable while they're at work. So I just thought it was interesting that a lot of times, I liken this to, sometimes you'll see like I don't know. You remember at Walmart used to have greeters, right? And they'd hand out stickers and stuff. And a lot of times they were like older people or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. They're just people that just sitting in the house or sitting on your couch watching TV all day as a 80-year-old or 75-year-old is going to kill you. And so it's like, hey, I'm going to go do something. I'm going to go, pass out stickers at Walmart, or I'm going to go, just
work at Cabela's or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Staying busy will just help to foster an environment to where you can meet people. And so that's kind of what it is. How to combat loneliness is just staying busy. Don't just become idle or lazy. And then the last one I had was putting down technology when you're in the presence of other people. If you can be in a room full of people and everybody's on their phone, and you might as well just be by yourself.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with the last one. The one about like idle hands, I think that like sometimes being busy can be just as bad as just watching. It's like I think sometimes it just masks the problem, or just hides it, or keeps pushing it off. So you get these people who are like workaholics, or they're like, oh man, I'm doing something productive, or I'm making money, and they just are so busy, or like this grind culture where you have people that are like, I gotta keep grinding, I gotta wake up at 2 a.m. in the morning, and I gotta go do all this stuff, but then like, in the quiet moments when they aren't grinding, they're like, I feel like I need connection. And so like grinding and working hard and being busy is not going to get you connection. It's just going to keep your mind distracted from connection, or from doing the things that you need to connect.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could see how taking it to the extreme and becoming kind of like a workaholic or whatever would just be a masked problem, for sure.
A couple other ones I had that you kind of mentioned. You mentioned like calling someone or reaching out to an old friend or something like that, or to a new friend. I mentioned extending invites to go out to lunch or to come over, spend some extra time. Engaging with people who have similar interests. We kind of talked about that. The last one, I think that it's not my favorite, but I think some people it works, especially maybe older people, is having like a pet for a company. I'm not a big dog person. I'm not a big animal person, really, for that matter. But some people, like if you're old and your spouse has passed away, and you're just having a hard time, then get a cat or get a dog, something to keep you company, and
something to cuddle with, sit on your lap.
Yeah,
it can be therapeutic, I'm sure.
It can be therapeutic. Just don't bring it on a plane. I think that sometimes people can use that as like a crutch, like, oh, I'm an old curmudgeon and I'm not nice to any humans, so I'll just be nice to animals, and that's how I'm going to feel not lonely. It's like, maybe you should not be an old curmudgeon and you can just go out and meet people, So almost maybe an excuse to not go meet people and like be with people. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit of both. So definitely I think this is important to keep in mind. I think that you have to combat loneliness. You have to actively work against it, because it's easy to just not call your old friends, not send a text message, not invite people over for dinner, not go out on a limb and say, hey man, like, would you mind grabbing lunch one day? Would love to get to know you more, a little bit more. Or would you want to go, to the range or something like that? So you kind of got to go out on a limb. And I think for guys, you don't want to seem like an idiot or like a try-hard or something like that. But I think that a lot of people are lonely too, and a lot of other guys are looking for friends. And
I agree. And I think sometimes too is that, like learn to identify it, right? Especially if it's something you struggle with often, or you have lots of ups and downs. Try to identify it early. Hey, I'm feeling this way, and try to reach out and try to combat that loneliness whenever you just barely start feeling that way, versus like, you run into some of these destructive things and it's starting to affect you mentally and physically and emotionally and everything else. And then you have to kind of really shovel and dig yourself out at that point. So I don't know, just try to catch it early.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I think this has been a great episode about combating that loneliness, and hopefully you can go find a group of men, or at least another buddy that can help you get out of that. And I think that listening to a podcast with a Brothers Creed podcast can help you with that. I mean, like just listening to uplifting things and engaging with people, even engaging online with people, can help you feel less lonely. It's not the best way to do it, but it can help you feel less lonely, or can help you find community in whatever interest that you have. So,
yeah, I completely agree. And I think some of the things we talked about today can even be used for cultivating just healthy relationships or new relationships. I mean, you don't have to be lonely to do a lot of these things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be lonely to reach out to family or friends. You don't have to be lonely to find a hobby, or you don't have to be lonely to seek professional help, right? I mean, it's a lot of these things can just be used even if, you just want to just strengthen your own personal fortitude. So
exactly.
All right. Well, this has been great. Hopefully, I'm definitely going to apply some of these things to my own personal creed. Jared and I hope that you do it as well, and let's build that creed together.
Let's do it.